Even the United States owes $38 trillion, the largest number in its history. The European Union owes $14 trillion, and Japan owes $9 trillion. Even oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia or export giants like Germany and China are carrying massive loads. But here's the interesting part. If everyone is in debt, then who is all this debt owed to? This is exactly where money, power, and history collide. A perfect example that nothing is as simple as it looks. Debt isn't just a burden, it's the very backbone of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every rise and fall revolves around this invisible financial structure, and if you follow the chain of creditors long enough, you'll notice something unsettling. The world doesn't actually owe money to anyone. It owes money to itself. But that doesn't mean everyone benefits equally. To understand how a planet crushed under over $315 trillion of debt grew to nearly 3 times the size of the global economy, we need to go back to the beginning. The idea of national debt wasn't born on Wall Street. It was born in war. In 1694, England was at war with France and running out of gold. The king turned to merchants for help. They financed the crown in exchange for ongoing interest payments backed by future taxes. To manage this arrangement, the Bank of England was created, and something revolutionary happened. The state could now spend money it didn't have. In return, lenders received something priceless, a government-backed promise that could be bought and sold. This was the seed of the modern financial system, the government bond. France copied the idea, the Dutch improved it, and the newly independent United States adopted it to finance its revolution. National debt went from being a sign of failure to a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow was the ability to govern. Empires once conquered land to obtain gold. Now they issue bonds to earn interest. The battlefield became the balance sheet. 3 centuries later, debt has become the world's dominant export. The U.S. owes $38 trillion, Japan owes over $9 trillion, and global debt increases by $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country is in debt, every bank is lending, and every citizen is both a debtor and a creditor through taxes, savings, and pension funds. So who's holding the other end of the rope? Let's start with the U.S. Half of its debt is public, meaning it's owed to investors. About 2/3 of these investors are American banks, pension funds, mutual funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. The remaining 1/3 belongs to foreigners. Japan is the largest foreign holder with about $1 trillion, followed by China with $800 billion. Then comes the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So when people say the US owes China, it's true, but only for about 2% of the total. U.S. Treasury bonds circulate mostly within the country itself. Banks and funds buy them, the Federal Reserve sometimes buys them back and creates new dollars, and Americans pay taxes that fund the interest, which then goes back into American retirement accounts. The debt is real, but the creditor is mostly a reflection of the same system. And this isn't unique to America. Japan lends to the U.S. through treasuries. The U.S. lends to Europe through the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through the World Bank, and developing nations lend money back to advanced economies by stockpiling foreign reserves and Western bonds. In short, it's a giant global game of hot potato. Every country holds someone else's debt note, and every promise is backed by another promise. And the markets themselves are the strongest players: hedge funds, pension funds, central banks. They decide who gets cheap borrowing and who must pay a premium. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who survives. And the modern high priests are central banks. They don't just manage debt, they create it. When the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank buys bonds, new money is created. One balance sheet's liability becomes another's asset. There is no money without debt. Every dollar, every coin, every digital unit carries an invisible IOU. But when confidence shakes, everything changes. In 2010, when Greece could no longer pay its debt, bondholders panicked. The European Central Bank and IMF intervened, but austerity, higher taxes, and mass unemployment followed. Argentina and Sri Lanka experienced similar disasters. When the system collapses, the creditors become visible. The IMF, credit rating agencies, anonymous bondholders. But after the collapse, the same logic resumes. New debts replace old debts. The machine restarts on the same balance sheet. Because today's debt isn't meant to be paid, it's meant to be rolled over. Governments don't pay off their debt. They issue new bonds to pay the old ones. It works like a never-ending subscription. Interest becomes a real product, rent, for the global economy. And the global economy is now dependent on this rent, like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. A government never fully closes its debt. It constantly refinances it. Japan has done this for decades and now exceeds 250% of its GDP. But bond yields stay near zero because investors don't expect repayment, they expect renewal. U.S. Treasury bonds are the safest collateral in existence. If the government paid off its debt, the safest asset would disappear, the dollar supply would shrink, and the system would collapse. Debt is the heartbeat of capitalism, pulsing through every pension, mortgage, and market. Politicians talk about balancing budgets or paying off debt. But the real goal is to make the debt look sustainable and trustworthy. And here's the secret. The plan isn't to repay the debt, it's to make the world believe it will be repaid. Debt is not distributed equally. Interest payments flow mostly to institutional investors, not ordinary taxpayers. Global inequality and global indebtedness rise together. Debtors and creditors are two sides of the same engine. But when the fuel runs out, we all see what happens. At that moment, the question, who is the creditor, becomes personal. There's no single face to blame, not China, not Wall Street, not the IMF. It's us. Modern finance has turned debt into money. Governments issue debt, banks multiply it, investors trade it, citizens depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor is now blurry. Debt was once bondage. Today, it creates balance. But if the balance breaks, if confidence is shaken, we remember what debt truly is. If this gave you a new perspective, would you subscribe to my channel and support me? History is full of answers, and I'll show you where to look. Stay safe.